In the Approaches to Gettysburg video, I was at Wrightsville and I put up on the board in front of the river a copy of a page from correspondence of Jubal Early's after the war, and I explained to you that that was a timetable. And I want to take an opportunity to show it to you with a better detail than I was able to do on that particular occasion. First, this is a letter. This timetable is included in a letter that Jubal Early wrote to a guy named H.B. McCullen. H.B. McCullen was a staff officer for Jeb Stuart, and after the war wrote a book called Jeb Stuart and the Gettysburg Campaign, an important piece of source material to read and carefully review. You treat it as you would a witness deposition, for example. This is a fellow who's a recipient witness. He's definitely partisan. He's got an interest in the case. He's trying to defend Jeb Stuart against the attacks that are coming down against him, again from several of these staff officers of General Lee. I mean, a lot of these staff officers, and I would have to say that Charles Marshall was probably the most aggressive about this. Walter Taylor also seems to have, had some influence in this, and as well as A.L. Long, and then their cronies. They're a little group of fellows that they hung around with. I mean, this little group of young men, whether they thought they were the guardian of General Lee's reputation, they're the reason in large part why the historians have developed the myths that they have about both the Battle of Antietam and the Battle of Gettysburg. McCullen was a partisan, so in reading this book you have to keep that in mind, and he's trying to defend Jeb Stuart, and he sent his manuscript, if not all of it, the part that involved Jubal Early, to Early, and asked for Early's comments. And McCullen's theme, in part, was the idea that Early should have been reaching out to Stuart. Early had cavalry, no question about it, and he had important cavalry. He had Elijah V. White with him, and this cavalry fellow, he was a partisan ranger type of fellow from Loudoun County. The White family of which he was a part they were both residents of Maryland, Western Maryland, and residents of Virginia in Loudoun County. And Elijah White himself owned property on both sides of the Potomac, in Maryland and Virginia, which, I'm speculating, but I suspect if we went back and researched the issue, you'd find that the White's Ferry that exists today, that you can use to cross the Potomac, is in fact the landings on either side of that river may well trace back to Elijah White and the property that he owned in the 1860s along that river. White was extremely familiar, both in terms of knowing all the important personalities in Maryland as well as in Northern Virginia, and familiar with all the roads, byways, tracks, paths, ways to get around. A very important character. And I think it's very instructive to say that General Lee assigned his regiment, which had been incorporated into the Army for this campaign, to Early's march to York. So White and his squads of cavalrymen were as far south from York as Hanover, and to the southeast of Hanover, almost as close to Manchester, almost close to Pipe Creek. And Early had other cavalry that was ranging to the east and to the northeast, breaking up railroads and destroying railroad bridges. But, it certainly was possible that White could have reached out to Stuart, because these people all knew where Stuart was coming from. And that was H.B. McCullen's theme when he sent this information to Early, and Early reacted to it very defensively and wrote this long letter, several, to McCullen, basically saying, don't say that, don't say that, please don't say that. And he tried to make a case for himself. And this is where this timetable comes from that I didn't give you a really good view of, and I'm going to do that now. Now this is the part I didn't show you very well. This is for Early's division right here, and this is for Rhodes' division right here. Now this is a product of this meeting, this conference that occurred at outside of Chambersburg on June 25th, after Ewell received a message that went unrecorded in the famous letter book the Virginia Historical Society maintained, in which Ewell got his orders about the idea that he was now to move toward the Susquehanna. Remember that on June 25th, in a letter to Davis, President Davis, General Lee told Davis that he was now instructing Ewell to move, quote, toward the Susquehanna. Susquehanna, get it right. And Early's telling us that in this conference he's ordered by Ewell to march to York. And that's the critical order, because that's, you would call that, if back in Rome they would talk about that gladiator that's got the pitchfork and he's got a net. And the way he overpowers his assailant in the Colosseum and sticks him with his spear is he throws the net out. Throws the net out over him like you throw a net out if you're a fisherman. And so that's what General Lee was doing by sending Early to York. He's throwing a net. And the enemy will react to that net by shifting toward York. A lot of force. So Early lays it down here. Now, all these locations that are listed here are in fact, you can find them today. For Rhodes' division, along with Ewell, and you notice he's left out Johnson. He's written in here, Early's written in here, Ewell and Rhodes. He didn't write in Johnson and Rhodes. And again, we're back to this issue about Johnson's movement, and we have to notice that, because Early's well aware of the issue. He's gone out of his way to leave Johnson out of this picture. I find that suspicious. So Ewell and Rhodes, Ewell's the Corps commander. That didn't make much sense to me. On the 26th, after that conference ends on the 25th, Ewell and Rhodes, along with Johnson, who's not mentioned, are moving to Shippensburg. On the 27th, they're going to be at Jacksonville, which is a little further up the road. On the 28th, they're going to be at the Stone Tavern. Okay? The Stone Tavern is at or near Boiling Springs, Pennsylvania. And the tavern itself although I haven't been there, been close to it, I didn't have time to turn to go there, it probably still exists. You'll see there's a road there called the Stone, it's either the Stone House Road or the Stone Tavern Road. You take that road, you'll probably come to the tavern. On the 29th, they're to move from the Stone Tavern, and this is south of Carlisi, oh, maybe 10 miles. So notice that, you know, there's nothing in here about Carlisi. So how it is that Ewell pushed roads further north from Stone Tavern to occupy Carlisi, which he did. And he didn't send anybody else of any substance further north from Carlisi. Some cavalry went forward to the bluff over the Susquehanna at Harrisburg. A regiment went a little beyond Carlisi, but no troops ever got up there to that bluff. So on the 29th, according to Early's timetable, Ewell, with roads at least, is supposed to be moving from the Stone Tavern to Churchtown. Churchtown is about 15 miles southeast of Carlisi. Turning and that's where it ends. That's all. When Early leaves Chambersburg on his mission, this is all the information he has. It takes him up to the 29th. And of course, it's on the 30th that this concentration is going to begin. That's when Early starts moving west from York, and that's when Ewell starts moving southeast from the vicinity of Carlisi. So they already know on the 25th that more orders are going to come to them by the 29th, the morning of the 30th, to tell them what to do next. And they're anticipating that they're going to end up moving back toward each other. Remember that Early's got no wagons with him, so he's living off the land basically, and that can't go on forever. From Early's point of view, on the 26th, he's going to be as far as Hunterstown. On the 27th, he's going to be close to Dover. On the 28th, he's going to be at York. And on the 29th, he's going to be moving toward Dillstown, which is, and now we mentioned Carlisi. Dillstown, approaching Carlisi. So on the 29th, on the 25th when he leaves, he already understands that on the 29th, Ewell is going to be coming down from the direction of Carlisi toward Churchtown, and Early's going to be coming up toward Churchtown from York as far as Dillsburg. And the Churchtown and Dillsburg are fairly close together. So, you know, obviously what's missing now is the order. What are these guys going to do when they get close together? Well, they're going to turn toward Gettysburg when that order arrives. And it arrives in the middle of Early's march. Now, let me show you his map also. Now, Early included this map in his letter to McClellan as part of his case for why he shouldn't be blamed for failing to reach out to Jeb Stuart. And you know, there's some things telling about it. Now the arrow here I drew in, the marks that represent the Pigeon Hills I drew in, and this business about Johnson and the Quartrain I drew in. The rest of it's the original diagram sketch as it's found in the letter. And the first thing that's obvious is you look at York where he was located. This spot here This spot right there is Wrightsville, and that's the Susquehanna River. If to cross the Susquehanna River at Wrightsville, it wouldn't obviously be enough for Gordon's brigade to cross that river. The entire division would have to cross that river. If there was any idea that the division was going to have any effect on this idea of moving on Harrisburg. And Early's reference to the business about, oh, he'd get over here and he would find horses for his 10,000 soldiers, and they'd ride these horses 35 miles to Harrisburg is you got to be honest and say that's silly. Absolutely silly. First of all, those Lancaster people, that's Lancaster County over there, they're not going to have any of their horses, much less 10,000, standing there in a big remuda, saddled up, ready for these soldiers to mount up and make their ride. That I have to assume that Early did that as an exaggeration, just to point out how ludicrous the idea was. I mean, that's Early's. He's a sarcastic kind of guy, and I mean, you just got to eliminate that completely. Now, he could march. He's drawn in this dotted line here, and this is where you'd find Churchtown about right there on the map, and you'd find Dillsburg about right there on the map, and so he's drawn that in to show the business, to match it to his timetable. But he didn't march toward Dillsburg when he left York. He marched toward East Berlin with Gordon's brigade marching on his left flank through Abbottstown. And it was at East Berlin, he says, that he got a courier come in with a message from Lee, or from Ewell, or from both. The message came from Ewell, and with it came a repeated message from General Lee to move on to Heidlersburg. Now, whether his scale is correct or not, I don't think it is. I think Heidlersburg is closer to this point. But you notice it's a hell of a different direction between this and between this. And why he took the time to draw in Shippensburg in this communication to McCulloch under the circumstances is a little bit mysterious, since we're all going to stop here at Heidlersburg and move toward Gettysburg. Why he needed to draw in Arntsville and Shippensburg? Well, in his letter he basically tells McCulloch that as far as he was concerned, what he expected to be moving back toward Arntsville and toward Shippensburg, as if the idea would be they'd end up back in the Cumberland Valley. And of course that didn't happen. But to me, in this situation, what seems most relevant is the fact that he's aware of Arntsville, he's aware of Shippensburg, and to me, he's letting us know, for posterity's sake, that there was a way to get across the South Mountain. The South Mountain is all through here. That there was a way to get through the South Mountain without going to Chambersburg, and without cutting into the Cashtown Gap. And he's also got this other road here that he sort of just trails off with, that's going toward Gettysburg. So the fact he's drawn in this part of his map, it seems to me, is to telegraph to us the idea that we should be thinking about Johnson. Why is Johnson marching all the way? Why are the trains going all the way down to Chambersburg and around when all they got to do is cross the South Mountain. And of course there were other roads through the South Mountain, south of Carlisle. There's one in this direction. South Mountain has a little spur right there. There's a gap. You could go right through that gap in this direction. And then there's a road through here and a road through here. So that's a very interesting diagram. And that letter and the letter that accompanied it, there were several written as he tried to make his case with McClellan, are worth getting a hold of the primary source. And these letters have to be transcribed, and some of these words are very difficult to read, and start the process of analysis all over again.